Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the first episode on we'll call this Wrench's Way, or something along the lines of that, for the way that I like to build all my ships, going from the ground up, from designing a gun to designing the hull, the armoring, shells, superstructure, and then of course the detailing. As a few people have expressed that they would like to see the way that I build and some of the tips and tricks I might have for mimicking like this. It is quite extreme, and some of the tips that I give may be a little bit above than what some people are willing to do. This set of videos is primarily just for educational, or if people just want to watch it. Whatever you want. And if you have any other questions, you can message me on Discord. There are multiple factors that I like to take into consideration before beginning the building of the ship. These are general estimation of cost. So for this certain ship that I want to build today, I do not have a ship that is between the 200-ish K destroyer that I have and the guided missile cruiser that I have, which is 529K. So the target range for this ship is 300 to 350,000. The next is figuring out the kind of armament that I want. So in this case, for this light cruiser, I wanted to have more guns that more pepper away at the enemy than giant guns that fire slower. So in this case, the primary armament I'm shooting for about 250 millimeters. Secondaries can be at 100 millimeters. Then there's the general size. So I want this to be bigger than my destroyer and my frigate, but also smaller than my guided missile cruiser. So somewhere in between those. So for this video, we will be focusing on the first step in the process, which is designing the guns. In my opinion, and the opinion of many other people, designing the gun first is a good thing to do before building a ship. Once you build the gun, you're able to generally size the ship's hull around it and be able to make it to where it has much more armor than if you were to just slap in a hull and then try to build guns around it. It's more effective that way. It makes it easier on me personally. For this light cruiser, since we are going to be going for about a 250mm cannon, I'm going to go with a smaller size turret pattern, such as this one. First step in designing the cannons for this cruiser is designing the shell to figure out what kind of what size of autoloader we will need. I have a general idea that I want this to use 3-meter autoloaders and no bigger. The next part in designing the shell is to figure out what kind of targets you are going to be going up against. What is the general purpose that you want this ship to be? So in this case, I want this to be able to take on early and some medium difficulty Steel Striders ships, some aircraft, and Onyx Watch. So I'm going to want more of an armor-piercing focused shell. So in this case, I'm going to be going for an armor-penetrating heat round. This certain round is very good against tanks as well. 90% of my land vehicles that I have presented in one of my previous videos, more often than not, I am using an AP heat round in that. Once I've designed about the shell that I want, now you can see down here, for those that have not used to optimizing and refining their shells, you can see right here that the clip length for this is 4 meters, and our goal is 3 meters. So in order to decrease this number right here, we could go down to propellant amount, and we can adjust that. Now, as you can see on this propellant amount over here, we subtracted all the way down to 0, and it is still not 3 meter, meaning we need to subtract 1. Now if we got the shell that we want, 3000 millimeters, will fit inside a 3-meter autoloader. We are ready to begin the construction of the gun. Another thing to think of before you begin the construction of the gun is how many barrels do you want it to be? How many APS mantlets do you want? For this one, and for simplicity, and for being able to make it fire faster without making it super complex, we're just going to do a simple 2-barrel 250mm. Another tip that I did not even know for the longest time, and that one of my other friends that I play with has showed me, is a way to be able to maintain the same fire rate as another gun, but still be cheaper than it. And here's how. As you can see here, the regular autoloaders are more expensive than the clips themselves. And so a lot of people, including what I used to do, would line up a bunch of autoloaders like this, put only one magazine on it, and call it good. And put autoloaders, and put ammo intakes on top of that. Sure, that works, but it's inefficient. Instead, what you can do to increase your fire rate and still maintain your cost to be lower is you want to put as many magazines on each side of this. Stacking them like this is not really ideal, but being able to put, if you could put 4 autoloaders on one, 4 magazines on one, then the faster it will fire and the cheaper it will be. So they'll aid us in being able to put more weaponry or more armor on our ship and still be in our cost range. Other tricks I like to do during the APS building process is if I have certain sections like these where I can't put anything on top of them because it would just be inefficient, we can easily go ahead and implement some recoil absorption. This will aid us with our accuracy later. And then, of course, if we have too much recoil absorption but not enough cooling, we can always remove that and then curve the coolers up, like so. But that's for the refining process of the cannon after we finish it. Once you get to this point in the APS turret building, or at least whenever I do, and I'm starting to make the turret neck leading up to where I'd make the turret cap, you also want to take into consideration how much deck armor you want, because you do not want to get and replicate the HMS hood at all. Not fun. Not gonna lie to you. Not fun. Very annoying whenever planes come overhead, especially even some of the deep water guard craft that have the little super tweeters that shoot a cram down onto you. If you have hardly any deck armor, it's not going to be a fun time. Now, on this light cruiser, since it is a light cruiser and it's going to be only about 300k, I'm only going to put one layer of armor underneath this, on the deck. Now, something that I can do to help that is underneath where I put the base of the turret, the little ring that the turret cap will sit on, I could put some heavy armor underneath that to hide it. Or I could also mimic over it if I want it to be heavy armor if I'm only going to put one layer down there. But on certain ships like heavy cruisers, battle cruisers, and battleships, and whatever you want to make, if it's going to be heavily armored, it's recommended to have 2 to even 3 layers of armor, whether that be alloy, metal, heavy armor, your pick. Another note to keep in mind whenever you're making your gun and you're getting ready to put on the barrels, there is a minimum barrel specification for your gun to perform properly, which is right down here in gun requirements. Barrel length for full propellant burn. So I need a 9-meter barrel instead of just an 8, just because of that point 2. So, for it to be maximum effectiveness, I will need to put 1 extra barrel on. So, since we're doing a 250mm, we'll go ahead and set that. Force required gauge. Set her up. And now we can take a look at how well this gun is going to perform. So for a 250mm, it is going to fire 27.3 rounds per minute. So we do have quite a lot of cooling, way more than we actually really need. So in this instance, same with recoil absorption, which is not a bad thing. So instead, what we can do is we can get rid of some of these coolers. And in their place, whoops, not what I meant to do. In their place, we could stick an extra autoloader. May not be the absolute most peak efficiency move possible, but it's better than nothing. Maybe, if we're able to fit it. Hold up. I may be retarded. Let's see here. Where can we fit one? Ooh. Ooh. Ah, fuck. Wrong piece. And wrong end. For those who may be new and watching the channel too, another note for APS is whenever you're putting on these magazines, if you see that little trumpet right there, that's where your input needs to be. And where those little pegs, like right there, are, that's where the input needs to be on. Now, in this case, like, I could have the trumpet over here on this end, as long as it's pointing inwards on that. So we'll go ahead and place that there. We have enough room to put that there. That's there. Now we can make the rest back to cooling. And then we can put back on some of our recoil absorbers. And it's not necessary, since this is all connected together, you don't have to curve this back around and make it connect. I just do because I'm nitpicky like that. So we will go ahead and slap back down our recoil absorption. And go ahead and set to all ammo intake controllers. We will need to do that for this one too. Our fire rate is now 30.6. Nice. And I also just realized that I want this to be up one. I did not leave room for the actual turret neck itself, the turret ring, because that's just the deck and then it's the turret cap. So give me one moment, I'm going to fix that. Now, we look at our stats again. Now that we have now upped the fire rate on this, now we can take a look here and make sure all of our statistics are good. Now you can see right here, we actually have run out of recoil absorption, but that is the main benefit to a 2 and a 4 barrel cannon, is that we are able to use this middle section for recoil absorption. This is especially useful on bigger cannons, but on smaller cannons I don't think we're going to be using up every single bit of space here, because it'd be a little bit overkill. Jesus, that's a little bit long. But in this case, we'll go ahead and use a bunch of it. And now we have way more recoil absorption than we need. So to cut back on costs, since these are still relatively expensive, we'll back out on some of this recoil absorption. So actually, what we could do, we could do 3 meter there, 3 meter there. Now I also see something else we can do. Since we're not going to be filling up all this space with recoil absorption, we can grab some more clips. Make sure the trumpets are facing the right way. Have the trumpet facing that way, have the trumpet facing that way. So now, because wherever that trumpet is facing, we'll connect it to that according to where the autoloader is. So it will not connect to that, but it will feed into this one. Pretty simple. So, since we do not have any, so yeah. Now the fire rate is 31.7. So, these little tricks just help slowly increase that fire rate. But, now we're left with the predicament. What in the flying fuck are we going to do with this middle space? Gonna keep it real with you, Chief? Honestly, don't know. I normally don't make small gauge 2-barrel stuff like this, but we'll figure something out, just like I just now figured out. So what we can do is that we can curve some of our coolers around like this, and then we will come over here to this one and curve it around. That will now give us a base to be able to put more autoloaders to utilize as much of this space as we can. Try to minimize our wasted space. So now we can just go ahead and now our fire rate is 35. That will probably be the maximum we're going to be able to get out of this. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and try and fill up the rest of that space with some more recoil absorption. So in this case, we could put a 4 meter there and a 4 meter there. We still don't have enough recoil absorption. So let us do... We could put some here in the turret neck. Since the turret neck's already going to be 3 by 3 wide, we have a little bit of room to go ahead and modify it a little bit and put some more recoil absorption. And now we have 300 more recoil absorption than needed, but we have now refined and increased our fire rate to where we have used up just about every single bit of space inside this turret. Made it nice, compact, and relatively efficient. Now the next thing we'll want to do is set its fire rate. This will make it to where the gun can fire consistently in a rhythmic pattern than just spamming all the shots it has at once and then taking a while to reload. Once we set our fire rate, the right one has this fire rate set at what it's supposed to be, and the other one is still at its maximum fire rate. And this is what I'm talking about by the right one will fire more consistently and not have to take time to reload near as soon as the left one will. This is more apparent on higher fire rate weapons, but on this it would take a while, but here's an example. Now you see, the left one had a little bit of break in its firing pattern. That's because I had to take just a second to reload the rest of its clips, rather than this one having a more consistent fire. It's always good to go ahead and set your fire rate just so your guns are firing as consistently as possible. Now another trick I like to do, especially this is nice on slower guns, to be able to make it to where it seems like it has more consistent fire, or faster fire, is to stagger fire. That is one of my favorite things to do on APS. It's also super satisfying whenever you do it right. So, in this case, to be able to make it to where they fire equally, to where it sounds like a consistent fire, you want to take a look at its fire rate. So in this case, it's 35, and you see in those parentheses, 1.72 shots per second. So, in accordance to how many barrels you have, in this case, we have 2. We'll just do 1.72 divided by 2. So, our result there is 0.86. So, we'll just say that this barrel is going to be the first one to fire. We are not going to put any synchronization controls on that. And you can also see whenever you're hovering over the gun, you see heavy barrel 4 meter weapon ID 1. The weapon ID 1 is what we want to focus on because that's the ID that this will go off of. So we'll come up to synchronization, weapon on same turret. You can also do this across different weapons on your ship if you wish. And we want to go to firing piece 1. The minimum delay is 0.86. So whenever we fire, it fires more like this. More consistent fire, and better follow-up shots. Now we have completed the APS turret itself. Now the hardest part for some people, and including myself, of the gun designing process is being able to design the turret cap to what you want it to be. Now in this certain instance, I do have a turret cap already that I have made for another cannon that I may use on this. But just for show purposes, I will make a turret cap from scratch and show you all how I do it. but I will pull up the other turret cap that I was going to use as a reference. The first step I always do whenever designing a turret cap is to go ahead and not worry about the shape and make a heavy armor box around the core components. Now that the heavy armor box has been made, now we can start shaping the shell around that box. When it comes to this part of the turret cap process, it's definitely a lot easier whenever you have some sort of a reference image you could base it off of, so you at least have a general shape that you want to go for. But for shits and giggles, in this case, I'm going to do one from scratch and decide against copying this one. We will use this on another ship at a later point. And just like that, there is our turret cap. Relatively simple. Not much to it. Little details here and there, and especially when it comes to the barrels and the mantlets around that, those are kind of deal breakers on those. And that's a good turret cap for us to use on this new cruiser. So, that's the primary armament. We may or may not have secondaries on this ship, but we will figure that out as we go along in the next episode whenever we begin the hull. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for the hull construction.